And welcome back, rugby fans, to Rugby 411. As always, I'm your host. My name is Joshua Shibata. And again, it has been an exciting week of Major League Rugby. Not a lot of shakeups in this week's power rankings, but there's been a few movement, mostly in the bottom. But again, it's kind of, we're still only 5 weeks into the Major League Rugby season, but it seems that some teams have pretty much kind of established their identity. Some teams are, in particular, Nola Gold has really surprised me with how they've been coming on. But I feel that a lot of teams are kind of finding their groove or kind of identifying the issues that they have, and we'll see if teams that are doing really well right now stay on top or start to peter on as the season progresses. It's a long rugby season, and as I mentioned before, rugby fans, especially in the MLR, it's a battle of attrition. It's really about how long you can last, how long you can keep your roster healthy, the depth of your bench to see if you can ride through to the top to the Major League Rugby Championship Shield. So again, power rankings, if you're new to my channel, are based purely on what goes on to the pitch. It's not necessarily about win-loss records, though, as you've noticed so far with my power rankings, it pretty much kind of coincides. Your more winning teams are on the top, teams that are suffering and not getting wins are on the bottom, but really it is about what you're doing on the pitch, more in the here and now, not necessarily what you've done lately. That's why, again, Nola Gold, a team that has really started to rise, has slowly started to creep their way up from where they were at the very beginning of the season, though the season is still very young. So, with that being said, let's talk about what's going on in the bottom, where we're seeing a little bit of movement. Another really, really poor performance for this team, and so it took me a little bit of time, just because there's a grouping of three teams that are kind of near the bottom right now anyway. And even though, two of those three teams lost, the manner of how this team lost in the very end really made me change it to bringing them from where they were to the very bottom, and that is our Canadian team, the Toronto Arrows, who slide down from the number 10 spot down to number 12, even though the two teams in front of them aren't exactly that impressive either. But it's really because the way that they lost, Toronto losing to Old Glory DC 3-29. After showing some life a couple weeks ago, Toronto has really been delivering quite a few really lopsided losses. This one only scoring 3 points. Now, granted, again, Old Glory DC is a tough team. It's one of my favorites going into the season as being a competitive team in the Eastern Conference. But man, just really only being able to score one penalty kick in a game it's really, really lacking. Granted, Toronto unfortunately suffered a pretty bad injury to Noel Reid. Hopefully he's doing well. He had to be carted off of the field. There was a lot of opportunities for Toronto at the very beginning. Kudos to Old Glory DCs for their defense. Toronto was stopped at the try line. Old Glory held them up. There was another opportunity for Toronto to score, and unfortunately there was a knock-on in the end of the try zone. So there were a couple of opportunities for Toronto, but weren't able to deliver. Also, two discipline issues started to come up in the game. I believe 7 penalties committed by Toronto in the first half alone. For those of you newer to rugby, really, you don't want to go into the double digits in a game. 7 in the first half alone really doesn't look good for a team, and Old Glory capitalized on it. I'll talk about this individual later on, but Joaquin Diaz Bonilla was able to really cash in on all those kicking opportunities, and unfortunately Toronto just not able to compete, dropping down again, like I said, from number 10 all the way to the bottom 12. Now, the next two teams, I might as well mention them right now just because they faced off against each other. It was our watch-along game of the week. The two remaining winless teams in the league, Dallas Shackles, Chicago Hounds, facing off in the very first Dog Bowl. it was a very entertaining game, even though it was between two winless teams. And in the end, Chicago was victorious. Dallas took the loss. So Dallas is at number 11, and Chicago is at number 10, moving up one spot. Both teams, again, even though Dallas did lose, they were the number 12 spot. The way Toronto lost, I had to slide them past Dallas. So Dallas was able to jump up just because of the Toronto loss. But man, the game, Chicago beating Dallas 24-22. So it was very close. It was a very close, very exciting game. Dallas defense playing very, very tough. I always was saying that Argentinian team, even though it's the Dallas Jackals, but considering the majority of the team is Argentinian, like I said, they've established this culture of very tough, rough rugby style, which is what the national Argentinian team is very well known for. Again, 10 out of their 15 starters are Argentinian, so it really is pretty much an Argentinian team. But they really played a rough physical style with Chicago. But Chicago, just that back line. Oh, man. Now that they have the back line that they've wanted with Billy Meeks, with Julian Dominguez, with a healthy Chris Mattina, with Bryce Campbell, that back line is one of the most dangerous back lines in all of Major League Rugby. And they produce... both Billy Meeks and Bryce Campbell were able to score a try. I also believe Julian Dominguez got a brace. So, I mean, again, just beautiful. It was Dallas. Chicago is a team that's going to be a lot of fun to watch throughout this season now that their back line is fully functional and healthy. Dallas made it close, though. They were in the game. But honestly, what really cost Dallas was their kicking woes. And unfortunately, between two kickers of Adrian Carlesi and Marcus Moroni. Between the two of them, they were only able to convert one kick out of 4 off of the tee, and they lost by 2 points. Okay, so 1 out of 4. If they were able to get those other 3 kicks, Dallas could have won that game. And this isn't the only time that has happened to Dallas. So really, Dallas has been suffering a lot with their kicking game. Alejandro Torres, who so far has been the most successful kicker for Dallas, still dealing with injuries. But man, until they can figure out how to solve their kicking issues, it's going to be tough for Dallas. Again, I still fully believe Dallas is going to win at least 2 games this season, but they are still looking for that first franchise win. This is the very first franchise win for the new kids on the block Chicago Hounds, the first win in their new stadium, SeatGeek Stadium. So big kudos to Chicago for the very first win. A very entertaining game. Tough luck for Dallas. Also, it has to be mentioned that one of their star players, Eric Napolsky, former UCLA Bruin, unfortunately was injured during the game, very early in the game. Hopefully he will come back because that's a big blow to the Dallas Jackals. Moving on. Staying at number 9, and just honestly, kind of really... This is, I mentioned how Nola Gold was kind of the shocker because they're trending upwards. This has so far been the shocker of this very young season. Your reigning, defending MLR champions, the New York Ironworkers, staying at the number 9 spot, dropping all the way down into the bottom 4, losing to New England 30-18. And man, it wasn't even that close on the scoreboard. There is something going on in New York. They, they lost to Nola Gold last week, or the week before. And if you listen to the commentary team, the coaching staff of New York admitted it was because of the travel to NOLA, the change in the environment. It was very hot, very humid. New York is definitely a winter country right now. They weren't used to the conditions of New Orleans, but this loss to New England was in New York. It was in their home field, and they still looked completely lost in this game, especially in the second half. New England was completely dominating the first half of the game, and just New York started to fall apart in the second half. Again, disciplinary issues hurting New York as well. Lots of penalties because of that. New England, and again, I'll mention him when I talk about New England. Jason Potras, their fly half was able to capitalize on all those penalties. But again, if you watch the game, and it's specifically the last 5 minutes of the game, you can see the attitude and just there is something wrong in New York. There is something going on with that team, and these losses aren't helping. Hopefully, they could figure it out before it gets too late. Because right now, the reigning defending champions, who I felt would be defending their titles in the championship game this year, man, just do not look very good right now. And again, the season's very young. We're only into week 6. They can easily change it around, but not a good start for New York defending their title. Moving on. Again, not a lot of changes going on now as we move into the top 8. Staying at number 8, the Utah Warriors losing to NOLA Gold 14-37. As I mentioned in my pick'ems, this was one where it, you know, I want to say this game kind of proved that NOLA is a legit threat this season. But again, it also depended on what Utah team would show up. Utah was very inconsistent last season, and it looks like they're starting to be like that this season. NOLA dominated the first half of the game, 25-0 right off the bat. A red card given to Utah in the second half didn't help matters. It was really all NOLA. Utah just struggled in the end. They were able to score a try, 2 tries at the end of the game, but really it was all NOLA. Just really don't know what to say much in that, except again, the inconsistencies of the Utah Warriors of last season seem to have carried over to this season. Now, the only other switch in these rankings is the 7th and the 6th spot that kind of switched. Going over to number 7's falling 1 spot because unfortunately they lost to San Diego 10-35 Rugby ATL. Now, granted, San Diego is a quote-unquote elite team, so Rugby ATL losing them, not necessarily too surprising. I had San Diego winning this game. I do have to give a shout out to Biddell, Rugby ATL fly half. Very, very impressive player. Has so far been kind of the bright spot of the team. The second half, Atlanta tried to come back. Unfortunately, just not enough to defeat San Diego. San Diego, I'll mention about their backline. I talked about Chicago's backline being impressive. Probably the second most impressive backline would be the San Diego Legion. Just Rugby ATL had nothing to do, nothing against San Diego. San Diego is just well overpowering. So sliding down just 1 spot to number 7, only because the other teams below them lost just as badly, if not worse. Moving up a spot is the before mentioned Old Glory DC. Moving up a spot after trouncing Toronto 29-3. Now, granted, they only moved 1 spot only because Toronto, before dropping to number 12, was at the number 10 spot. So really beating down on one of the lower ranked teams doesn't necessarily boost you up very high. And everybody that's above them also won or did better against better quality opponents. So Old Glory, even though they're very impressive, shout out to Joaquin Diaz Bonilla, who, as I mentioned before, took advantage of all the penalties that Toronto gave them, is now sitting on top of the most points scored so far this season, I believe at 50. So, hey, again, Bonilla was very impressive. Also, his kicking game was really good. He did at least 2 50-22 kicks, which is basically where you kick the ball from your own 22 line, bouncing into the 50 zone territory of your opponent. That allows your team to get the ball instead of giving them the possession away. Really great when it comes to strategy. Really keeps the opposition on their back foot. So far right now, one of my top players of the first half of the season is Joaquin Diaz Bonilla, and a big reason why Old Glory DC has been pretty strong so far this season. Moving on, staying again at number 5, just because, again, they're beating on technically now a weaker ranked team, and the top 4 teams have done a little bit better. New England Free Jacks defeating New York 30-18. And again, it's all about what you're doing now. If this game took place maybe at the beginning of the season and New England did New York as bad as they did this game, New England would definitely be higher up. But unfortunately, New York, like I said, suffering losses to NOLA Gold. Now this loss, there is something going wrong with New York. But you got to give credit to New England. You also have a shout out to their fly half, Jason Patras, who I mentioned before that gone is Bodine Waka, who was one of the best players last year in Major League Rugby. Jason Patras has come in as the replacement for Bodine Waka, and boy, has he been impressive. He has done almost everything to basically make people wonder, wait, Bodine Waka who? Big shout out to Jason Patras for being a really, really great in this game. He was able to take advantage of 4 penalty kicks, converting 3 of them. Was really, really good in this game and allowed New England, again, to just really dominate New York. Now, again, don't know if it's really all New England. Not giving anything away for you New England fans. I know there's a lot of you guys that don't like the fact that I'm not really giving New England as much credit as you think they deserve. But it may be something about New York. New York, there's something wrong there right now. I'm hoping maybe they can turn it around before the end of the season. Moving on, your top 4, I'm going to kind of spoil it right now, have not really changed. Number 4 is Nola Gold, coming off of now impressive win over New York, also beating down Utah, 37-14. But again, in this game, you know, it's against Utah, who aren't necessarily one of the topper teams, so even though it looked impressive on the scoreline, I couldn't really push them past any of the top 3. But right now, Nola Gold doing much better than what I was expecting. They completely started dominating against Utah. Tries scored by Webster, Hodgson, Campbell. I mean, they are really turning the season around. We'll see if they can keep that momentum going as the season progresses. Houston was one of the teams that were on the bye, and you know me, I don't really like to move a team on a bye if I can help it, because they didn't really do anything, so I don't feel any right to have them go up or down. Number 2, San Diego Legion, staying at number 2 after they defeated Rugby ATL. As I mentioned before, when we talk about backline, Chicago has a very impressive backline, possibly number 2, or arguably number 1. San Diego's backline, where you have Nonu, Osberger, you have Mikey Teo, you have Braki, and you have Aoke joining the group. I mean, that backline, woo, wow. You know, that's going to make the San Diego-Chicago game very, very impressive, because you have 2 powerhouse backlines going against each other. Yeah, San Diego's backline is just as scary. Arguably, maybe more scary than Chicago's, but that's what's keeping them afloat up there at the number 2. And then the other team that was on a bye, so again, I don't feel right having them move. The only remaining undefeated team in the league, the Seattle Seawolves. So yes, that is our power rankings right there. So again, not a lot of movement. Most of it is down here. But, you know, again, it's because a lot of teams are starting to find their identity. Like I mentioned before, we're starting to see who are going to be the teams that are going to struggle. Though, I feel Chicago has a good chance now with that back line to start to move their way up. Don't know what's going on with New York. These 4 teams, I think it's just whether or not they can find their identity. Free Jacks have a good shot at moving up. I'll admit to that. NOLA, we'll see if they can stay up there. And then right now, I feel the elite teams are possibly these 3, Seattle, San Diego, and Houston. As I mentioned before, I think the Western Conference is going to be the more dominant conference between the 2 when we get into interconference play. Now, moving on. A particular individual is really happy about this part of the segment, where we go over the results of our pick'em pool for Super Brew, Major League Rugby, Rugby 401 pick'em pools. As always, I like to always thank the 20 individuals who are participating, technically 19 footy balls, who are participating in the league. You guys are making it fun. Keep putting in your votes. It's going to be interesting to see who wins in the end of the season and gets themselves a Major League Rugby t-shirt of their choice. So, without further delay, because I know there's an individual that can't wait to see this, let's see this week's results. Bam! And once again, his 2nd golden cap of the season, USA League and Union Rugby fan, Coop. Congratulations, you have the top score, a perfect score. The only individual to get all 5 predictions correct, as well as the bonus points, a solid 8 points. Good job, brother. And again, you asked me if I dread seeing you on the top. Not at all. Again, it's a game. It's just for fun, and I know you kind of, really want to win this, and hey, I hope you do. But everybody else below you is definitely going to try to make it as hard as possible, including myself, even though I have been struggling this season. So, number one, USA League and Union Rugby fan. Number two, SD Cal Guy with 6.33 points. Number three, MR Rugby, 4.83. And then we have a bunch of people tied for fourth and fifth. Villa Farrell, John Hawkins, the reviewer 812, who I remember from last year, and then our defending and reigning champion from last year, all J Long, all tied with 4.5. Unfortunately, my buddy Frisco Flame got the wooden spoon this week, but again, it might be different if footy balls would play. I really hope you start to contribute. Again, guys, just take it for fun. Just pick teams. It's obviously good if you know what you're doing to pick, but really, pick any teams. You could easily pick the winners and have a winning week. But you just gotta try. If you don't, as they like to say, you can't hit the balls that you don't swing at. You can't win the games if you don't pick them. Okay, so that's our weekly results. Let's see the overall results. Bam! And with the win this week, USA League and Union Rugby fan is back in the number one spot with 36.33 points. Very impressive, brother. Dropping down a spot, Matthew, MSDRFC 83, drops down one spot with 33.83. Going up two spots because he had the second place this week, SD Cal Guy, 33.33. So he is right up there competing for that top spot. Right behind him is John Hawkins, 32.83. And then dropping two spots, Jahigo, 31.16. So it still is very, very close. I gotta say, it's not like what it was when we were all chasing all J Long, but all J Long was like 10 or 12 points ahead of the first place team. It's still very, very competitive. So as I mentioned, like with footy balls, anybody can still win. So don't give up, guys. Just put your picks in. Don't forget to put your picks in. I'll try to remind you if you watch my videos, because anybody can still win. We still have a lot of rugby left. So that being said, as always, I do hope you appreciate and watch my videos. Let me know what you think of my picks, my power rankings. Let me know if you feel they're about the same as yours. Like I said, not a lot of changes because, to be honest, not really a lot of upsets in these games. Obviously, Coop, USA League Rugby Union fan, understood that because he picked them all. But really nothing too out of the ordinary with upsets comparatively to last week as in this week. So anyways, again, I hope you like my videos. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you on the pitch.